Hello and welcome to this lecture on professional ethics, roles, and the codes which govern them. This lecture video covers material found in the supplemental readings available in the Learning module, and it especially focuses our attention on ethics codes. Though to begin, let's recap the relationship between professions and society, and this is material that you should be familiar with since we covered it in the previous Learning module. So as we have the specialization of roles within complex societies, this of course entails the specialization of abilities and skills, and also requires a specialization of knowledge and training for those who would conduct those roles. This also then results in a differential authority. Those who occupy these roles with specialized training and knowledge have power. Society grants them a degree of autonomy and decision-making regarding those roles. Professions arise under circumstances when the social interest is served by allowing some roles to become self-regulating. Remember, the difference between a profession and an occupation in general is that a profession is in a significant way self-regulating. And also society allows the development and application of specialized role-related knowledge. Now the self-regulation element is going to be important, and that's where ethics codes play a significant role. Recall also that professions are constrained by social values, and the three principal values involved here are the social trust, which is owed to the whole of society, to everyone among us. Fiduciary duty is the second, and those are duties that are owed to particular individuals, especially clients. And the value of equality, and this is especially important for professions that operate in a democratic context. Also remember that there are two modes of regulating professions. One is through external regulation, and here we have in mind laws or policies that require professionals to be licensed or to undergo certification at the end or completion of training. This may of course require retraining or continuing education to ensure one's license and certification are current. External regulation can also be a result of setting and maintaining public performance standards, and also can be enforced through the sanctioning of deviant or incompetent or otherwise non-compliant behavior. It's important to note that external regulation is largely implemented through the public service in its oversight capacity. For example, the State Chiropractic Board oversees and regulates chiropractic professionals. The State Attorney General's Office oversees and regulates lawyers within the state. And so licensing, certification, public performance standards, and sanctioning of incompetent behavior would be conducted by the members of the public service within those agencies. Self-regulation is an important element in a profession, and it's an important feature that distinguishes a profession from most other kinds of occupation. It's also the major part of that socially granted autonomy that professions have. And ideally, self-regulation is something that is the result of professional organization into some sort of association or society. For example, the American Society for Civil Engineers or the California Teachers Association. These are organizations that represent the professionals and the profession that practices and conducts itself within those roles. So the professional association is the body that actually guarantees the compliance of the individual members. So self-regulation is something that professionals impose on themselves through the formation of a kind of association or society. And that society then guarantees the compliance of the members. Self-regulation is, of course, for the benefit of both the professionals and the clients, but also the public. Because what self-regulation does is it allows the profession to establish a mechanism or a means by which practitioners, professionals operating within that profession can minimize the potential for conflict between the public benefit towards which they are all supposed to be acting, and in virtue of which the public has granted the autonomy and power that they have, and the specific client benefit that the individual professional is striving to achieve. Now, this conflict can't always be minimized, but an important part of self-regulation is to try to minimize the conflict. And it's easy to see, if you just give it a moment's thought, the way in which public benefit and client benefit can be in contradiction. The public has a benefit to ensure that the levees along a flooding river are secure and safe. However, an individual who seeks the support or the services of a civil engineer to build a levee might have an interest in making sure the levee is as low as possible so as not to spoil their view of the river. So the public's interest in having secure and safe levees, which would indicate they should be as high as possible, contradict and conflict with the client's interest in keeping those levees as low as possible to preserve their view. So self-regulation is a significant step toward a profession's ability to minimize this conflict for the professionals who practice within it. And of course, the failure of self-regulation leads to public outcry for greater external regulation. So it's in a profession's interest, and it's in the professionals within that profession, it's in their interest to ensure that everyone complies with the mechanism of self-regulation. Otherwise, the public will be outraged at the behavior of some, probably just a very small minority of professionals who violate some element of the public trust, and the public will then demand greater external regulation. Now, a central element of an organization's ability to self-regulate is the development of an ethics code. Now, many professions and institutions or organizations have them, though they don't always go by the moniker of ethics codes. Sometimes they're called honor codes or statements of values or professional oaths or oaths of office or mission statements and what have you. And more than just professions have these, though for any of these professions or institutions or organizations, these ethics codes are a symbol of a mature, unified, and well-organized profession or organization. And it enhances the social recognition of the profession's capacity for self-regulation. So a profession which doesn't have an ethics code is a profession that is likely to be in an early stage of developing, not quite so unified and well organized, and is still in the process of receiving that social recognition, that recognition by society that they are capable of self-regulation. Ethics codes are a public expression of a profession's ethical orientation and commitment in articulating a series of values or principles or regulations. An ethics code demonstrates to the public, this is what this profession is about. This is what every member of this profession will adhere to, and so it serves as that public expression, that public face of the profession's ethical standards. It's usually the result of an internal process, and that internal process involves quite a high degree of self-criticism, where participants, practitioners in the profession get together and they talk about and evaluate what kinds of things go well, what kinds of things don't go well, what sorts of values and ideals they should be striving to achieve, what their purpose is, how they should best achieve it, and so forth. So self-criticism is an essential element of that internal process, which results in an ethics code, as is codification, consciousness raising among practitioners, and then a critical self-evaluation at the level of both the profession and of the individual members. Ethics codes also require some degree of institutionalization of a process for regular assessment, refinement, and revision to the code. Here's an interesting historical fact. The American Society for Civil Engineers has revised its code, which it has had in place since the late 1800s, a mere 3 times in that long history. So that doesn't, however, indicate that they're a lax organization. Rather, they're quite vigorous in their internal process of self-criticism and critical self-reflection. It's just that they have been and have established a very effective ethics code, and so there is little need to update and revise it, except insofar as technological advancements have made that practical and feasible. Compare that with the American Bar Association, which is the professional association governing lawyers. They have revised their ethics code since about the late 1800s, at least every 10 to 15 years, and it is a whopping, I believe it's 60 pages now long, compared with the civil engineers ethics code, which is 2 pages long, 2.25 pages long. So there you have two extremes of a process of organization and self-reflection that results in two very different ethics codes, and that also are pertinent and relevant to two very different kinds of social roles that are played by each profession. Ethics codes must also be responsive to the public interest, to values and expectations that the public holds in order to ensure the public trust is served. There are 3 types of ethics code, so if you wanted to go and look for your profession's ethics code, you will likely find that it fits into one or a combination of the following 3 types. One is an aspirational code, and this is really nothing too much more elaborate than a statement of ideals, values, and principles toward which members of the profession should aspire. So it articulates those values and ideals that every practitioner should aspire to. And its focus is on the fullest realization of professional achievement. So it identifies best practices and articulates what it is that a good professional of this sort does and what they avoid doing, and the benefits that this brings to practitioners, clients, and societies. A second type of ethics code is an educational ethics code. Now, it may also articulate some aspirational ideals and principles, but its focus is primarily to educate members about the ethical basis of the profession, and thereby to provide guidance for avoiding or resolving ethical problems which practitioners regularly encounter. And if the code doesn't specifically articulate problems or general problems that practitioners might encounter and how to solve them, it provides the kind of structure that would allow practitioners to extrapolate from certain cases or certain situations into novel or rarer cases, so that they can have that kind of guidance for how to resolve problems that they should expect and some that might be unexpected. The third type of ethics code is a regulatory code. And in addition to establishing some ideals and perhaps some educational elements, a regulatory ethics code is primarily focused on ensuring the efficacy of the profession's ability to regulate itself through the provision of rules which govern professional conduct and articulate what compliance and non-compliance are with regard to that profession and practice. It also provides procedures for adjudicating grievances, either between a client and a professional, or between professionals, or between professionals and the public. And also therewith imposes enforceable sanctions. So it might articulate even what kinds of penalties are imposed when findings of non-compliance are established. And these regulatory ethics codes are generally additional to, that is, they stipulate sanctions that are additional to any procedures and sanctions that might be imposed by external regulation. So here a good example is the American Medical Association, which has a significant portion of its ethics code devoted to this regulatory function, and it stipulates the conditions under which a practitioner might lose their license or otherwise be prohibited from practicing and being recognized as a medical practitioner, and that would be in addition to whatever external sanctions might be imposed by the state for findings of wrongdoing. All right, now ethics codes function in a variety of ways. They serve primarily three functions internal to the profession, and they also serve some functions external to the profession. But let's take a look first at how ethics codes function internal to the profession. First, they function as a source of identity and community. Ethics codes provide a conception of oneself as a practitioner within a tradition and a community with shared practices, shared values, and a shared purpose. And thereby, it fosters group solidarity and a common purpose by specifying those values and objectives which all practitioners ought to adhere to and pursue. Second, an ethics code functions as an enabling document. That is, it provides guidance through an organizing and evaluative framework which informs decision-making across a variety of situations and conditions. So if a practitioner in a certain profession is unsure about how to address a particular problem that has arisen with a client, or with clients, or between clients, or with another professional, they can refer to the ethics code to find guidance for how to resolve that conflict, or how to address that conflict, or how to make decisions in the best way toward the best practices of the profession, as the profession itself has defined that. And third, an ethics code functions as a deterrent to unethical behavior by providing a link between professional actions and professional sanctions. If you engage in this kind of conduct, it will lead to this sort of sanction. And so it can deter unethical behavior among the less scrupulous members of the profession who might be motivated to avoid sanctions and thereby will refrain from wrongdoing in order to avoid the sanctions. And it also provides an affirmative duty of reporting ethical violations by colleagues, and this is an essential element of self-regulation. If a member of a professional community knows of the wrongdoing of a colleague, it is incumbent upon them to facilitate in whatever ways possible the correction of that wrongdoing. And so ethics codes can provide guidance for how that can be achieved as well. All right, functions external to the profession. Now, ethics codes serve a purpose outside of the profession, and primarily the purpose they serve is to serve as a tool or instrument of public evaluation. When an ethics code provides a public expression of the profession's value, it thereby provides a basis for the public to formulate expectations about practitioners' behavior, what they can expect, and what they should expect not to see or not to observe in that behavior. It also provides a basis for the promise of service or contracts. So if a professional engages in a contract, then the ethics code can help the public understand how that contract or how that promise of service plays out in the professional's duties. It also provides an accountability mechanism to clients and the public. So a client who has a grievance with a professional that they hired can take the ethics code to that professional and say, hey, you violated Rule 27 subsection 2, and here it stipulates that you should have refunded my deposit in the amount of such and such and such, or whatever the issue might be, and failing a resolution with the professional, him or herself, to go to the association or eventually to the public if there's a regulatory agency involved. Ethics codes can also support the claim of autonomy and public trust that the profession asserts by actively linking professional values to the client or the public's welfare and interests. And it thereby can deter unreasonable expectations and interference from outside agencies. The second primary function that an ethics code plays external to the profession is an adjudicative function. It provides the profession with a mechanism for resolving disputes before they go public, before they necessitate the intervention of a regulatory agency, and also they can provide guidance for external regulatory agencies to resolve disputes or to update or revise the regulatory standards and expectations. There are three purposes of ethics codes. The major purpose is to avoid moral hazard, and moral hazard is what results when the person responsible for the wrongdoing is actually not held responsible for it. The risk that one undertakes when engaging in a certain kind of conduct is borne by someone else when that conduct fails. And so avoiding moral hazard ensures that the consequences of actions are borne by those who act, so that the risk of failure is assumed by the one who undertook that risk or who acted in light of that risk. Another purpose that ethics codes serve is to maintain professional integrity, that is to ensure the profession's reputation both among other professionals and with the public, and it thereby manages and directs conduct in the profession's, not the practitioner's, interests. And finally, it serves the public interest by facilitating the avoidance of conflicts of interest, whether those are personal or client-based conflicts of interest with the public interest or otherwise, and it assigns priority to the public interest over the personal interests of the professional. So whenever there are disagreements with the public interest or the client's interests or the professional's interests, the ethics codes for most professions usually assign priority to the public interest. Of course, we have to understand that the degree to which public interest trumps client interest or client interest trumps public interest varies from profession to profession and also from ethicist to ethicist. Also, we have to be aware that there is disagreement about what exactly the public interest entails. In ethics codes, the public interest is typically defined by the profession, not by the public, and it's through regulatory agencies that the public interest is generally defined and articulated on behalf of the public, and there may be disagreement between the profession and the public, or the profession and the regulatory agency about what exactly the public's interests consists of. There are some limitations to ethics codes. It's possible for a profession to develop a weak or poorly designed ethics code when they're more interested in public relations than ensuring their practitioners' ethical conduct. When the ethics code is developed to serve the interests of the profession and protect professionals without regard to their clients or to the public. When they are not treated by the profession and the practitioners themselves as serious or binding, that is, when it stipulates certain kinds of behavior but then never enforces those, or has no mechanism by which to enforce those. And another limitation is an ethics code that may have provisions that are morally controversial, that is, where the public and the profession significantly disagree about the profession's ethical standards. An ethics code has to avoid these kinds of criticisms if it is truly to serve the professional members and the public's interests. And we have to also note here that an ethics code is not a replacement for a robust account of ethics. So that a profession has an ethics code is very important, but that should not be the end of the profession and professionals' discussions of ethics. There should be an ongoing analysis and critical reflection on the ethics code, and that should be done in light of a broader account of ethics. Since ethics codes derive from a more robust account of ethics and a process of deliberation about ethics. And typically when ethics codes are revised, they're revised in light of the degree to which they satisfy the ideals of the profession and the justifiable expectations of the public. All right, wrapping up now. Ethics codes are useful incredibly useful to ensure uniformity and consistency of values across members of a profession or an organization, to form the basis for the formation of social expectations and public accountability, and to minimize moral hazard, prevent conflicts of interest, and sustain the profession's reputation with the public. Ethics codes are not a panacea, however. They won't guarantee good behavior among professionals and public servants. However, they do provide guidance, and the guidance that they provide depends on the efficacy of the connection between the values that it espouses and the established practices, and also the degree to which those espoused values meet or comply with socially recognized purposes and requirements of the role the profession fills. Here are some questions to think about, and if you can answer these questions, then I think you're in good stead, and this will be the conclusion of Learning Module 2's lecture videos. Thank you very much.